Villanova's Graterford program, which provides men on the inside the opportunity to obtain a BA or an associate's degree. Kate obtained her master's in social services and a master's in law and social policy at Bryn Mawr Graduate School of Social Sciences and Research. She believes the Graterford program strongly demonstrates Villanova's Augustinian mission to provide service to others. And I agree with her on that. Those of you who know Eastern State or have come to the Searchlight before know how, well, most recently, Felix Rosado, who was our Searchlight speaker in December, called us and spoke to us live from Graterford, from a maximum security prison. Felix graduated magna cum laude from Kate's program. He has a bachelor's degree, just like I do. There are many of the men, they are all men, many of the men that we work with at Graterford as advisors to this project have their bachelor's degree from Villanova University through this program, and incidentally, so do I. And it's really interesting to talk to them. They really feel a connection to Villanova, and they feel gratitude for that program. And it really is extraordinary. I, as a Villanova graduate, the son of a Villanova professor, I'm so proud of the university for a decades-long commitment to providing full bachelor's degrees to men who want to make something of their life while they are incarcerated at Graterford. So I should also mention that we're lucky to have Kate here tonight because apparently Villanova was in some kind of a sporting event last night. So on that note, thank you for making time to come out and talk to us. We're going to switch computers in about 2 seconds. We will be welcoming Kate Meloney. That's it.
All right, so not that tall.
Got it.
Can you hear me? I have a tendency to float when I walk, so if you can't hear me because I moved away from the mic, just let me know. All right. So thank you very much for having me here tonight. I'm very excited to be here. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. It is something that I have really dedicated my life to. So, as Sean said, I am the program director of the Graterford program at Villanova. Villanova has had this program since 1972, and it was founded by Professor McKenna, who's no longer with us. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this program further on in my talk, but first I kind of want to talk about my perspective and where I'm coming from. Right? I think that's very important when you're talking about criminal justice reform and prison reform. It's important to understand where that speaker is coming from, what the perspective is. So, although I am a professor at Villanova, I teach on main campus, and I also teach at Graterford. My background is social work in social justice. So I have worked in prisons on the West Coast, on the East Coast. I've worked in state prisons, private prisons. I have worked in county lockup, and I've done all kinds of work from researching HIV, AIDS education programs in Philadelphia County jails to working with the Anti-Violence Partnership. I was their program director of the Families of Murder Victims, which is housed in the DA's homicide unit. So I've kind of run the gamut when it comes to prison reform and criminal justice reform as well. So when my goal tonight really is, I want you to be able to take away something that, I want you to take away something that you've never heard before. I want you to be able to gain some kind of knowledge that you didn't know previous to walking in here, and to be able to share that with at least one other person. Okay. That's kind of how this, how we're able to spread social justice when we're talking about prison reform, especially when most of the people that we are trying to serve are in the inside. So that's my main goal, is that you take away at least one thing from tonight that you didn't know previously being in here. So we're going to discuss post-secondary education in prison, and we're going to be using Pell Grants as a guiding narrative. I think that's going to really help us understand where prison education, when we're talking about college, really started and lead us to where we are today. So Pell Grants were first enacted in 1972, and they were brought forth by Claiborne Pell, who's a senator from Rhode Island, and he was influenced by the GI Bill. And he found that opened up the door to college for people who would normally have that ability to go. And so he felt that we should continue that, especially in an era when we had so many baby boomers going to college. He believed it should be available, that those doors should be open for everybody, including marginalized communities, people who couldn't afford college, right? And so he built off of Lyndon B. Johnson's Basic Educational Opportunity Grant, which was the extension of the Higher Education Act of 1965, and he decided to build this whole program that would be permanent. This was a really exciting time because it meant that we were opening college doors to everybody. That in theory, everybody had a chance. Well, there's another group of people that also fell into that category, and those were people who were incarcerated. And so it was at that time that inmates were allowed to use Pell Grants towards gaining a college degree. And so colleges across the country, universities, really grasped onto that and decided that this was a way to grow their programs. So, but what was happening during that era is really important to understand, because the 70s is when everything really changed for prisons. So when we're looking at 1970, especially around 1974, we see that the approach to working with those who are incarcerated has drastically changed. So for the last 50 years, before 1970s, this country was focused on rehabilitation. And the Department of Corrections across the country really held on to the idea that treating inmates like they had a medical condition, right? Treating criminology as something that could be, that criminality could be cured was the way to go. And that this is it would reduce recidivism rates, and that it gave us hope that they could be diagnosed and cured and hopefully not come back. That all came crashing down in the 70s. There's a lot of argument as to why, and as to what was happening at that time. So there's several different theories, and one theory that people that find that's very popular is the nothing works theory, which was brought to light by a sociologist at the time named Martinson, who did a study, a meta-analysis of all of the different rehabilitation programs that were around the country at the time and what their efficacy was. So were they actually working? And his team found that in their eyes, it wasn't working. Rehabilitation wasn't working. We were throwing good money after bad. Guys were getting out and they were going right back in. So therefore, rehabilitation was a waste of time and was a waste of money. And people really held on to this, which is really interesting because it wasn't just a conservative idea. It was also held onto by progressives at the time who felt that rehabilitation programs, which include skill building programs, education, was a way of the state controlling individuals. And so a lot of progressives at the time felt that they could get on board with saying rehabilitation was not the key to lowering the numbers of people who were in prison at the time, which I find is a very interesting point. And another theory is that we stepped away from rehabilitation because the rehabilitation ideal wasn't working, in that we as a society at that time did not believe that humans were able to really change. And that the idea was that this shift in society and shift in culture came from what was happening in the country at that time. So we're talking about Vietnam, Watergate. The country was shifting and coming out of the 60s, and people really felt that that people who were going into prison were going to be the same no matter what when they came out. Which is an interesting way of thinking about it, and it's somewhat sad because we are still, in my mind, we are still in that nothing works mentality, right? Where we throw up our hands and say that, well, they're just going to come back anyways, so what's the point, right? Which, and I'll talk about this later, is actually no longer found to be true. So, moving on, when we, what I really want you to look at when we're looking at this slide is to, before we move on, I want you to see that in the 1970s and towards the end of the 1970s, the prison population was about 340,000. That's really low considering what it is today, which is about 2.2 million. Okay, so what's going on here, right? And if you look at from 1910 on, things do shift, right? We have wars, we have depression, we have changes in economy, so it makes sense that prison populations go up and they go down. But we see that in 1980, right? It skyrockets. And I think that we all know what happened in the 80s, the war on drugs. And I could spend an entire semester discussing this, so I'm going to have to kind of skip over it, unfortunately. But what I will say is that during this time, we saw that while incarceration rates were going up, arrest rates were either staying the same or were going down. Okay. So this war on drugs was really a war on people of color and the poor. And when we talk about the war on drugs, that was actually coined by Nixon. And he was a product of the late 60s, early 70s, and he at that time believed that that treatment was the way to solve this problem, and he actually wanted to spend a majority of his war on drugs budget money on treatment. His drug czar, Jaffe, was actually a medical doctor who specialized in drug addiction. That didn't last very long. Okay. We got to the 80s, and even though only about 3% of Americans felt that drug crime was a major concern, all of a sudden we were spending huge amounts of money on incarcerating people for drug crimes, for non-violent drug crimes. Okay? So what's going on with education during this time, right? That's what we're here to talk about. What's happening? So what we see is during this time, once we've left the 70s, and we see that we are no longer spending money on rehabilitation, and we're primarily focused on punitive efforts. We see a lot of education programs go quiet. So they're not getting a lot of funding, and they're only holding on by the good graces of whatever warden is in charge of their facility, right? So we see that throughout the 80s, and we see that Pell Grants were what really kept a lot of these programs going. Pell Grants were what made it possible for books to be bought, professors to be paid, and for these incarcerated individuals to obtain degrees. However, we also saw that sentences were getting longer. We saw more and more people being arrested, and we saw more and more people getting life sentences. And so our prisons were becoming more and more crowded, and we had less and less funding to spend on things like skill building classes, any kind of post-secondary education classes. So wardens were getting squeezed. I will tell you that when I was working in the in Philadelphia County jails, my education program was closed because they needed my classroom to house inmates. So, and that was in the early 2000s. So it still happens today. So programs were holding on simply because they had Pell Grants or they had private funding. So let's talk about where that went, because that's very important. Where that went was the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act of 1994. I don't know if anybody in this room is very familiar with this, but this was the huge turning point for criminal justice in the United States. This was when we saw increased mandatory minimums, which were already in place. They've been in place since 1925, but now we're using them to give inmates life. We saw the 3 strikes law, which also gave more inmates life. For example, I know of an inmate, I believe in Missouri, who had 3 ounces of methamphetamine on him, and because of 2 prior convictions, that means that he's now serving a life sentence with no possibility of parole. We also saw truth in sentencing laws. What those are is the convicted person now has to spend at least 85% of their sentence incarcerated. So they can't get paroled early, right? They have to spend a majority of their sentence incarcerated. Who was the author of this bill? Anybody remember? Can anybody tell me? This was Bill Clinton.
The author or the president? He signed it.
He signed it.
Who was the author from Congress?
He helped write it. This took 6 years to put together, and it was House Democrats that helped pass it. So just think about that, and think about where we were in 1994 as a country to pass something like this. So although this particular act didn't create the war on drugs or didn't create the mass incarceration that we are in currently. It certainly ratcheted it up. One other thing that this act did was it canceled Pell Grants for inmates. So inmates were no longer, incarcerated individuals were no longer allowed to draw on Pell monies for their education, post-secondary education. What that meant was that universities and colleges had to rely on their own funding or private funding in order to stay alive. Villanova University did that. Large universities, especially Catholic universities, were able to keep their programs going. Within 10 years of this passing, we went from 350 programs within the United States to 12. Okay? So why does Villanova care? Why do we keep this up? This is why are we putting money into this? And it's because of our. So Villanova is an Augustinian Catholic university who believes in Catholic social teaching. And this means that one of our main goals is to serve the community and to serve marginalized individuals and other marginalized communities. I don't know how many of you have sat in strategic planning meetings. This person has. I have in my life of working in nonprofits that created beautiful and lovely mission statements that within 6 months we kind of forget about, right? The thing about Villanova's mission statement is that it's something I live every day. It's my job. My job is to fulfill this mission statement, which is something I haven't really been able to do before in any of my other work environments, so that is very exciting for me. It's really about committing to the common good. Okay, so we're talking about what are Augustinian values. There are 10 of them. My favorite Augustinian value is that the last part where it says stewardship of the common good requires that we willingly accept accountability for others through service to them without control of them. That's very important. So Villanova was able to hold on to their program, right? We lost a lot of money by losing Pell, but we were still able to stay within the institution, which is really important. Once you lose your place in an institution, it is very, very difficult to get back in. So why do we care about post-secondary education in prison? Is it just to make people like me feel good about myself? Are we actually making any kind of difference or any kind of change for those who are incarcerated? And the answer is yes. According to the Rand Corporation study, they did a study in the early 2000s that was it was a landmark study, and showed that indeed post-secondary education reduced recidivism rates. Those who get a post-secondary education were found to lower their recidivism rates by 13%. They were 43% less likely to go back to prison if they had a post-secondary education. So what does that mean? Well, in the typical general population of people who do not have a post-secondary education opportunity while incarcerated, within 3 years of release, about 2/3 of them will be rearrested. And within 5 years of release, about 3/4, or about 76% of released inmates will go back. Those are really scary numbers when you think about it, when you think about the fact that we currently have 2.2 million and rising currently incarcerated individuals in the United States. And that's not a tenable situation. So currently that's about 1 in 30 Americans are incarcerated. And that number goes down drastically when you look at how many people in the United States are not only incarcerated, but are touching the system, either on parole or probation. That number goes much higher. So not only does it reduce recidivism rates, it also means that for every dollar that is spent on education, we save between $4 and $5 for incarceration costs. So for every dollar we spend, we save between 4 and 5. That got a lot of attention. Now, all of a sudden, we saw that it wasn't just progressives and liberals who were interested in post-secondary education. We saw that people like the Koch brothers started to give money to institutions in Texas because they saw a savings there to start private prisons, which that's a whole other talk. But what's really interesting is that we are now seeing that this is going across the aisle, that there is interest across the aisle to serve people who are incarcerated with post-secondary education. So let's get back to our timeline. We see that Pell Grants have been removed, right? We're now down to 12 programs throughout the country, primarily large universities, Boston College, Notre Dame, that have been around for a very long time. And what we see is this study that comes out, and Barack Obama is, when he's president, he also understands the importance of education. And so he decided that he wanted to bring back Pell Grants for those who are incarcerated. Unfortunately, he didn't have the support in Congress to do so. In fact, him just talking about it meant that there was a lawmaker in New York who created a bill called Kids Not Cons. Great name. And so Barack Obama decided the best way to bring Pell back was to use an experimental site that the Department of Education has, that they have funding to do innovative and creative ideas in education and to see if they work. And so what they decided to do was to bring back Pell Grants for a select number of universities and to see if that worked. Unfortunately, the budget did not include money for evaluation. So some people were questioning what the purpose behind this actually was. But was there a reason? Was this media? Why were we doing this? But people like me didn't ask any questions. We just signed up for it because this sounded great. And so Villanova was one of the 67 universities who signed up to be a part of this pilot program. What this meant was that a lot of these universities, a majority of them, had never had a program before. And this was their first time doing it. And we are in the middle of it. The program ends in 2018. We were promised that it was a great program and that it will continue. That was during Barack Obama's term. We don't know right now where it lies and whether or not it will continue. Betsy DeVos thinks it's a great program, but she keeps saying, I'm not in the criminal justice business, so I really can't say. Which is too bad because she's in the education business, and these are Americans who deserve an education, in my mind. So what are some of the issues behind Pell Grants? I get asked this a lot. I get this asked from parents. I get asked this by people I meet at everywhere. why are we giving people who are incarcerated, people who have committed a crime, why are we giving them money for an education? When you have somebody over here who's worked their entire life, middle-class family, worked their entire life to send their kids to college and they can't afford it because tuition is way too high. So, for example, going to Villanova currently will cost you $65,000 a year. Okay, and that's not the most expensive school in the Philadelphia area. So, what do we do with this, this imbalance? It's not fair. That's what I hear all the time. It's not fair. They committed a crime, and my child didn't. Well, the issue is that people aren't quite understanding programs. And how programs work is they are individualized. So if this person over here takes $5, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're taking it away from this person's pocket. So you have your own personal pool of Pell money that you can draw down from if you are eligible. Technically, yes, it means that if we have more people taking Pell, that overall that money is going to go down, right? Yes. However, right before, I'm going to give you some numbers, right before this Crime Bill Act was signed in 1994, incarcerated individuals were supported by 0.001% of the Pell Grant budget in that year. 0.001%. It's not a big number. They're not using a lot of the money. So let's give you another number. In 2013, the Department of Education did a study and found that U.S. American high school seniors left $2.9 billion of Pell money on the table. So if you know of anybody who's going to college, beg them to fill out a FAFSA. People are not filling out FAFSAs. At this point, Pell isn't going to pay your tuition. It's about $5,000 a semester if you are a full-time student. That might buy you books. But what you're seeing is that people are not signing up for it. So where do we get that number from? If I said that it's a bottomless pit, right? Where are we getting this money from, or this number from, 2.9 billion? And where we were getting that number from is those were the amount of, if you took everyone who was eligible for Pell and you gave them the maximum amount of money, that's where that number comes from. $2.9 billion left on the table, and that just goes away, right? That just disappears. So my argument is that because there are two separate issues here, that tuition in the United States is definitely too high, and that's a major issue. And that needs to be, there needs to be social activism around that. However, that doesn't mean that we can't then also educate those who are on the inside. We see that there are benefits, and we can do both at the same time. So I hear that a lot. We can't educate people who are on the inside until we fix the tuition problem on the outside. And my argument is that we can actually do both at the same time, and there's room for that. Because what I'm seeing in this country is that we have these two groups of people who are fighting over resources that are limited, and we're not asking the question, why are those resources limited? Who's responsible for that? What system is responsible for that? And how do we change that system in whole? Okay. I've been talking at you for a long time. I'm going to talk for about 4 more minutes, so we can have some questions or some dialogue. I want to give you kind of a picture of what the program that I direct looks like. We currently have 80 students, and most of them are full-time. We have 8 classes that are taught every semester at Graterford.
They are taught by Villanova professors, and they are also taught by adjunct professors from around Philadelphia area. These courses that the professors teach are part of their course load. So they count as a Villanova course. That is a very big deal. That means that these are our Villanova students. There's nothing different about them. They're just on a different campus. So they have to take tests to get in. They have to meet with me. They have interviews, essays that they have to write. And then once they are in, they are treated like a regular Villanova student, and they have to meet all the same requirements. They can go on academic probation if they're GPA, and they can also be on the Dean's List, which many of them are. That's a very big deal for them. They really want to be on the Dean's List. I'm asked as soon as the semester is over, am I on the Dean's List? So this is a very exciting opportunity for the men that I serve. This is something that they look forward to. They actually, unlike other students of mine, they do all their reading. Sometimes they read twice to make sure that they fully understand. There's no technology on the inside. Everything is done. Professors have a pen and a whiteboard, and that's it. Last semester, we did a computer science course by paper. And so it takes some innovation and takes imagination on both sides, the professor and the student, but we have that, and it's very exciting to be a part of that. I've talked for a very long time, so I think I would like to open it up to questions, if there are any. Thank you. Yes?
If, do you have any estimate, if you said you're going over those 80 students, if you took all the prisons in the 5A county area, what do you think the number would be of people prisoners who would want to participate?
I currently get letters from around the country.
No, I
I know, of people who want an education. I can't give you that number. It would be, I have no idea.
Do you reject any?
I do reject people who are not capable of working at a college level, yes. Yes, but if they, this is something that people work years to get transferred to Graterford. Years. I have somebody that worked with his mother about 3 years to get to Graterford so he could be part of, just to test. I had to tell him, you might not make it. Yeah.
Could you say that about Villanova's program, does it reach out to other facilities, other prisons, or is it like, in a sense, locked in or committed just to Graterford, and that's enough, and that'll keep you busy for the rest of your life and all that? But I visit a federal prison nearby, and I don't see any university or education institution reaching those guys, and they're totally bored, the staffing, as you know, reductions since Trump has been in are severe.
It's huge, yeah.
And the prison, this federal institution says, oh, we just don't have the time or the staff to offer anything, and so forth. So I'm just wondering, what can you do? Can you enliven another college, or do you talk to colleagues at other colleges, universities to say, start your own program and go to Chester or go to upstate and start a program? Do you have any experience?
Yes, it is it's extremely difficult. So you are dealing with two huge institutions. You're dealing with the university, and you're dealing with a university who has liability issues and PR issues. And you're dealing with Department of Corrections. If you're dealing with federal level, it's a completely different level. I would love to work in federal. But right now at Villanova, I'm it. I'm the program director and the professor, and I do all the fundraising, it's all me. I'm the advisor to all 80 students. If I could be at 4 other prisons, I would be there tomorrow. I can only work so many hours a day, unfortunately, and there are so many other colleagues like me who are very passionate and really want to do this, but simply don't have the funding. This is not popular, unfortunately. Yes.
I have a question. If you get $5,000 from Pell for a student, where's the rest of the money coming from?
Actually, if I got $5,000 for 25 of my students, I wouldn't need funding. That would cover it for me.
The Villanova cost?
So what it does is, most universities do an at cost. So they lower their tuition rate and cover most of it. We pay for, and I also have private funding as well, which covers more than half of my program. So there is some in kind. And that's generally what the structure is for most universities and colleges. Community colleges are completely different. Does that answer your question?
She was asking 8,000 to go to Villanova.
Right, what I'm saying is it's an in-kind donation.
But from Villanova,
Correct, yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm not a prisoner, I'm an ordinary student, costs 65,000.
Correct.
How much do I pay?
If you are not on the inside, then that's correct.
That was her question. So I
Oh,
got
that's your
5,000
question.
I got
I'm sorry, I
$5,000
didn't understand.
grant, and I got $60,000 of loans.
Right, and that's what I was saying, is that tuition in this country has skyrocketed, and that needs to be dealt with. And I don't have the answer to that. So I apologize. Yes.
Do you have people in Congress or people in the state legislature who are interested in this program and can obtain money? It seems like you gave me numbers earlier. 3/4 of the people without this kind of education wind up back in jail. And you gave me a percentage, only 40-some% with a college degree wind up in jail. The other thing I'm curious about, what fields did I study? Maybe not electrical engineering like I did, but what did I study?
You'd get a degree in general liberal arts and sciences.
History, English.
General liberal arts and science, correct, and you can minor as well. Because we only have 8 classes a semester, it's impossible to major in one particular, in history, for example.
What about political support?
It's not
It's
gonna
not
happen,
there?
not in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is one of the most difficult states when it comes to Department of Corrections. North Carolina is, Texas are way ahead of us when it comes to post-secondary education in prison. Texas has their own school district on the inside. Yeah.
You mentioned that they have a passing exam, they have to be college ready. So what is Villanova doing or is somebody else doing? Because we know that most of these folks are people of color, they've got lousy educations, they're not college ready.
Correct.
So who fills that gap?
Correct. That's a really great question, and that's something that we are currently working on. We had created a college preparatory program that was going to be run by several of our alums who were on the inside, and they were transferred. So I'm currently working on how we will fill that gap. We are one of the only institutions that has an active alumni chapter on the inside. They are extremely active, they organize themselves, they have an executive board. And I tell them that this is their program, and I meet with them regularly, and they help me figure out what they need, what their students need, and how they can best support their fellow students.
I know this is a little like inside baseball, but Graterford theoretically closing soon.
Yeah.
What, has there been any like friction with the OC and moving to Phoenix at all, or?
How much time do you have? So Phoenix was supposed to open a long time ago, and the contractor, so PA does, lowest bidder. And they definitely got the lowest bidder on this contractor. There's a lot of building issues. I'm not sure if they want me telling you this, they hung all the doors upside down, so that took a while to come back and turn them. And so we will be moving. Nobody knows when. Only the commissioner and the governor will know when that's going to happen. And so that keeps me up at night, because if they do it tomorrow, I lose my semester. So it's not fun. And it's very difficult on the men. That's who it hurts the most. The men who are lifers currently have their own cells. Once they move, they will be doubled.
Is your program moving?
Yes. As far as I know, it's every day it's different. We have a new superintendent. That just happened. So it's every day is a mystery when you're working with the Department of Corrections.
How do people in the program get out and get a job that's utilizing the degree versus serving life sentences with they get like an entry-level job?
That's another great question. I came on board about 3 years ago, 2.5, and at that point, there wasn't any data being tracked. I am currently doing that. Some of our guys who've gotten out, we have an alumni chapter on the outside, so they support each other when they come out. There's one who was working in Mayor Street's office when he got out. A couple have started their own businesses. I know one person has moved to Britain and started his own business. They're still getting out on the felony. And, that doesn't change that, unfortunately.
So what do those who are serving life sentences, what have they expressed as the benefits of getting post-secondary education?
Great question, so glad you asked that question. So as many of you know, there's a Supreme Court ruling that changed the sentencing for juvenile lifers. So a lot of men in our program are juvenile lifers, and they are now getting out, and now they have an education. For those who are lifers and who are not going to get out, right? Life means life in Pennsylvania, but no chance of parole. Those gentlemen gives them a sense of purpose. But beyond that, I can't tell you how many family members have told me that they're now going to getting a 2-year degree, going to community college, or getting their associates, or even getting their BA because their father or their uncle can do it. If they can do it on the inside, I can definitely do it on the outside, which to me, if it was just one person, that would be very meaningful. They come to graduation, the family members come to graduation, they see this, and they decide that they can do it themselves. We have a large graduation, our president and our deans come, everyone wears their regalia, we do a procession, and we try to do it right, best as we can. Any other questions? Yeah.
So to get back to the question of getting some of these inmates college ready, so the ones that don't even have a high school diploma or a GED, they have to get all that first?
Yes.
Is there a program currently inside doing that?
Yes.
Could you repeat the question?
So she wanted to know is what happens if they don't have a GED or a high school diploma. And there are programs on the inside that give men an opportunity to get their GED. I'm not going to say they're wonderful programs. A lot of our, some of our students actually have college, some college credits that we actually transfer in. So not all of our students are coming in with just a high school diploma. I want to make that clear as well. But yes, they can get there. Our graduation happens at the same time as the GED graduation. Those guys see our men getting a degree, and then they want to sign up as well. So, did that answer your question?
What do you say, other than playing champion basketball, what do Villanova students who like your program or want to be part of your program, what role do they play? Is there an undergrad major, criminal justice?
We have, I'm part of the sociology criminology department. We currently bring graduate students out to Graterford, and we will start to bring undergraduates to take classes there as well with the men. Yeah, so it's a give and take, but otherwise, no. There's a lot of liability issues, especially with the new Sandusky laws.
What are the liability issues?
Cannot bring anybody who's underage. So everyone has to be 18 or over, and not all college students are. Any other questions? Thank you very much, everybody. I really appreciate it.